Good afternoon, class. You are welcome. We are having STH 333, which is Advanced Clothing Design and Construction. The topic we want to take is Clothing Construction Techniques. Clothing Construction Techniques. As you all know, we have techniques in all that we do. We require techniques to achieve success. There is no skill you learn without knowing the techniques of learning. So we can refer to techniques in clothing construction as the secrets that you need to know to achieve success in your clothing construction. One can improve what is sewn by making use of some special techniques or processes. So these techniques can be used to improve finishing or workmanship in clothing construction. In all that you do in clothing construction, whether in sewing, in finishing, in workmanship, you have techniques that you can employ in order for you to achieve success. So many times you come across so many challenges in the process of your clothing construction. Once you know the techniques to employ, you will not have problem. Now we have so many techniques that we can use, including construction. There are many, there are numerous, but we are going to discuss just a few of them. That as you go on in your clothing construction, as you are facing some challenges, you will be able to know the type of techniques you are going to use to achieve whatever you want to achieve. Number one technique we want to discuss now is that overlocker should be used simultaneously to trim, to stitch, and knitting the seam. What do you mean by overlocker? It's when you finish sewing your cloth, before you start sewing, you want to knitting the edges of your seam. So sometimes you take your clothes to those people that will help you to knitting because you don't have the overlocking machine. So what you call whipping, when you get out to knitting the edges of your seam, what you call whipping is not called whipping in clothing construction. We call that machine overlocker. So the stitches that overlocker we do is called the overlocking stitches. So when you are using the overlocker sometimes they work simultaneously. They trim, the overlocker will trim, it will stitch and knitting the seam at the same time. So we should use overlocker for knitting the edges of the seam. Number two, bias binding. Bias binding. When it is essential to cover the fabric edge, bias binding can be folded in half and stitched along both edges of the flat seam. There are so many types of seams. We are talking about flat seam. If you are using flat seam, even if it is closed seam, you can use bias binding to knitting the edge. You can fold it into two. As I've said, you fold the bias into half and then you stitch along both edges of the flat seam. You're knitting it instead of using overlocker to do the knitting. You can also use bias binding depending on the style and whatever you want. Sometimes bias binding also can act as a decorative means of knitting the edges. Then we have another one that is called shaping techniques. Shaping techniques. Under the shaping techniques, we have that. You know, the work of that is to give you fitness and to make the dress, the wearer, to be smart, to remove fullness from the garments. So that's are used for fitting. They are used for fitting for the wearer. So that's are stitched along the the fold line and pressed down towards the side seam. So when you are using that, after sewing it, you press it down along the folded line toward the side seam. So when you do it like that, the that will be flat and neat on the clothes. So many times you find ready-made dresses very neat, because they follow the normal techniques of clothing construction. Some people just sew that and leave it like that. That's a roadside tailor. They are not bothered about whether to turn it to the toward the side of the seam, or whether to stitch it along the fold line. So all these things, as a professional, you must do all these things to make your work neat. Then we have pleating. Under shaping techniques, we have pleating. When you are pleating, a pleat is a fold in the fabric which can be pressed in order to keep its shape, or stitched down along a section of the fold. So you have skirts. Skirts are pleated to allow for ease of movements or to give a decorative effect. So you use pleating for so many reasons. During your clothing construction, you may use it for decoration, you may use it for roomness, or to make to have easy movement when you are walking, or something like that, for so many reasons. But you have techniques of doing it. So when you are sewing plates, you know how to fold the fabric. You have to press in order to keep its edges. So you follow all these processes to make the pleating neat, not that this pleating will scatter. Though we have machine for pleating, especially for pleating, but while you don't have it, you follow the normal process. Then gathering, that is also under shaping technique. Gathering, fabric width can be reduced by gathering to give a wavy shaping to curtains or garments at the waistlines or sleeves. This technique can also be useful when you are inserting sleeves. So gathering, if you don't know the technique of gathering, you will miss it. It won't be neat, it will not be good. So you have to follow the normal process. You also have gathering is also to ease, for easing. It's also for fullness, to ease in fullness and to arrange fullness at the top of the sleeve. You make a row of matching stitching along the seam line. A row of matching stitches along the seam line when you want to do your gathering for or sleeve. Make it along the seam line and 6 mm inside seam. 6 mm inside seam line between notches. Most time you have notches on the sleeve head to match the sleeve with the body. So you make a row on of matching stitches along this same line, 6 mm inside seam line between notches, using a long matching stitch. What do you mean by long matching stitches? This one is when you say you want to do gathers, you turn you stitch regulator of your machine into the long one, so that when you finish stitching, it will gather. When you pull the thread, it will gather. But if you don't use the long one, use short stitches, it will not. You won't be able to pull the thread and you won't achieve your aim. Then we have seam. Seam should be smooth and even in an appearance on the inside and outside. Fabric should not pucker. What do you mean by pucker? P-U-C-K-E-R. P-U-C-K-E-R. Fabric should not pucker. That is, it should not be squeezed together. It should not be folded together and squeezed after sewing. So even in width should be observed throughout. You should make sure that the width of your seam should be even. Not that one side will be big, the other side will be small. It should be even. You should press open or close according to the type of seam and how it is used in the construction process. Your seam, if your seam is open seam, press it to open. If it's a closed seam, you close it. You don't close the seam that is supposed to be opened. And you don't open the seam that is supposed to be closed.